Welcome to LeapFrogBI Academy course CT130, Transform Components. In this course, we're going to first define the transform component once again, and we're going to demonstrate creating a few transform components. Again, we'll be using the same, or working toward the same dimensional model that we created in BD110. And we'll be also reviewing the common types of transformations and talking about how we accomplish those transformations in LeapFrogBI. Okay, so to get started, let's just bring up our dimensional model that we're working toward. What we're going to do here is we're going to create a couple of transform components, initially starting out with the data flow path for dim promotion. So let me pull up my data flow diagram here for dim promotion. We can see that in previous courses, we've already completed creating a profile. We've staged our data, or created the components to stage our data, created a PSA component, and now we're at this part of the data flow. Now, with this particular dimension, we have a dimension key, special offer ID, which is the same as our source primary key. And we also have a modified date. All that stuff put together means we don't need to worry about our dimension aggregation. However, we do still need to handle our load status tracking. And that's what we're going to do here in this DS promotion, dimension source promotion. We're going to extract out of PSA the records that are not yet processed or that have not yet been loaded into the dimension. And we're going to do that using the load status flag that we've already seeded in PSA with a default value of 0. So the idea is when records get loaded into PSA, they have a DLS, dimension load status, equal to 0. And we're going to extract all of the zeros here. Once this entire path is done, we're going to update that load status flag to a 1, meaning processed. So the next day, or the next process, we'll only be extracting the new records, which again will be equal to 0 for the load status flag. All right, so let's jump over to browser here where I have already logged into LeapFrogBI. I'm in my projects. I'm already current on my CT130 project. I'm going to move over to PSA, and I'm just going to take a quick look at the special offer PSA. Go to the component details. And I can see that my record time is on modified date, as we've already defined in the data flow diagram. We have an expression here, an expression DLS promotion, dimension load status promotion, where I've cast 0 to tiny n. So basically it's a constant of 0. And that's now an output field. So this is the field that I'm going to be using to determine which records are processed and not processed. All right, so let's create a transform component. I'm going to go to my transform component type. I don't have any here yet, so I'm going to create a new one. Quickly taking a look at the types of templates that are available in the transform component. There are a few different options here. Most of the time, you're going to be using this transform main. This does all the common transformations, filtering, creating expressions, aggregations, common types of transformations. Then we also have pivot and unpivot. Those are dedicated for those types of operations. We have set transforms, unions and intersects, what have you, you can do there. Then we have a special type called records to string. We'll discuss that in a separate course. It has to do with bridge dimensions. And then we have our existing transform, which again we'll discuss in another course, but it just allows you to consume data without actually staging it. All right. So I'm going to use transform main. I'm going to give this a name, which is going to be, let me just check my name here. We called it promotion is our dimension name. So this is going to be called DS promotion. I'll be able to complete this pretty quickly. So I'm just going to go ahead and set it up as completed. The source of this is going to be my PSA special offer. And I don't yet have a place to put this. So I'm going to put it into stage for now, and I'll come back and update this after I create another connection for transforms. Again, that's just my choice. You can set up your connections however you want. Now this is an interesting option here, write table. Whenever you create a transformation, by default, you will just be creating views. And those views become building blocks one on another so that you can um, create your final result, whatever it is that's desired. In this case, we actually want to write this output, this DS output, and that's because we want to persist, we actually make that data persist in that table so that later on we can actually do an update by using that table's output without worrying about it changing, say if PSA had been loaded at the same time that we were loading a dimension or something like that. So this is going to create a table, not a view. I'll save this. So we have our transform in place. Now what we need to do is define what we want this transform to do. So I'm going to go to the component details. And again, what we want this to do is we want it to select all the records that are not processed in PSA. The way we're going to do that is we're going to create a filter. And a filter, if we take a look at this, it's just very simple. I'm going to select a filter. And a filter is a Boolean expression. So we need to go create an expression. We're going to do that next. But quickly looking at the filter area, I can apply a distinct to this. I can put a top, use ties. I can put the order by clause here if I wanted to. Today we just need to do a simple expression that says, give me everything from PSA where the load status is equal to 0. So I'm creating a new expression. This is going to be a compare. And we set that to a tiny int for the load status. So that's a number exact. And we're just going to call this our not processed expression. Call it whatever we want. I'm going to take DLS promotion, dimension load status promotion. I want that whenever it's equal to 0. So notice I can type or select into these areas. This is a combo box. If I hover, it's going to tell me what it's going to cast something that I typed to. In this case, it's going to cast to a decimal, which I really don't care. It's just a 0, so it should be just fine. I'm going to save that. And now I can see that I have a not processed expression, and I also have a 0, which it auto-created for me because I typed in a value there. All I need to do now is set up my filter. I have a Boolean expression data type filter expression available to me here, so I'll select that and save it. And I am all set. My transform for this data flow is complete. Whenever this is deployed, it will create the table and it will select all the unprocessed records out of PSA. All right, so let's go back over to our data flow diagram. We can now take this guy and we can say he's been created. And there's nothing to do here, so we're not going to create another transform there. But what I am going to do is I'm going to go back to each of these different paths in our data flow, and I'm going to create all the transforms that are required to complete this model. And then I'll come back in a minute and we'll review a couple of the things that were done. Okay, I've gone through and created all of the transformation components that I can create at this point. So let's take a look at what we have. We already created this transform here for dim promotion. That takes care of that path. Under product, we have the same situation on all three of our paths. We have a DS product, a DS subcategory, and a DS category. None of the DAs were required here either. So those are exactly the same as we just covered with dim promotion. Under dim location, once again, same situation, just a DS, no DA required. So I just did the same thing. Selected all the unprocessed records from my PSA. Nothing required for date. This is an existing date dimension. We'll discuss that in the dimension course. On the fact, however, there's a couple of differences here. We do have the same FS, fact source, where we're selecting unprocessed records in these two cases. So those were exactly the same as we just covered. Let's take a look at this top path here where we're collecting our fact detail or line item records. We required a component here, a transformation component, to identify the current version of a fact. So again, PSA could have multiple versions. Which one is the current version? And when we load a fact, we want the the current version. We don't want to aggregate multiple versions or anything like that. So let's take a look at this component, fact current sales order detail, quickly to see what we did there. So I'm going to my transforms, fact current sales order detail. You can see this was sourced in my usage map here from fact source sales order detail. So this is I know I now have all my unprocessed records. Fact current should now be identifying the current version of those records. And all we had to do was select the maximum modified date across sales order ID. So in LeapFrogBI, I just created an expression here, modified date, which is the maximum value. We used an aggregation function to get the maximum value for the modified date. And then we added that to our output fields. Now, anything that we include in our output fields, whenever we have an aggregation field, all other fields will be included in the group by clause. So in this case, we'll have a output that groups by sales order ID. This is our detail. And we'll also have an output that shows the maximum value for the modified sales date, which is exactly what we want. Now we know we can identify the current version or the latest version of our sales order details. All right, so with that, we're going to join back to this FA here, which is fact aggregate sales order detail. This is an inner join, and the intent is that we limit all of our unprocessed records to only the current versions at this point. Let's take a look at our FA sales order detail. FA sales order detail right here. Again, I can see upstream, this is sourced from two components this time, my fact source, and I'm also joining to this fact current. So let's look at the detail here. Okay, so we can see we do have a join definition here. One join. If I take a look at my join definition, you can see that I'm joining on an inner join to sales order detail, which is exactly what we wanted to do. And our on clause says join where the modified date is the same and the sales order ID, detail ID is the same. So now we know that we have the latest modified date only for each of our sales order IDs in this component's output. So to create that on clause, we had to create a couple of expressions. We can see here color-coded that in my expressions, if it's red, that means that it's another expression. So in this case, same modified date is this expression here, which just says modified date equals modified date. Same thing for same sales order ID. We use a logical AND expression to come up with our JOE or join on expression for current detail. And that's what we have applied here to our join. Now, that just about completes this component, but there's one more piece that we need to create, and that is this join here to this dimension. This is a current dimension for our header information, which doesn't exist yet. So I've flagged this component as being as requiring modification, and I've placed a note on this join so that I know that when I come back here, I need to address that. And I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to come back to this component in LeapFrogBI, and I'm going to set the status to pending. And that'll further flag me that more work is required on that component. Okay, we're just about done here. Let's take a look at the rest of this fact data flow. On the header, we have this DS where we're trying to identify our current version of each of the sales order IDs, sales order headers right here. But we're also coming off of this path, and we're doing a second pass on our fact table. So what we're doing is we're actually updating our fact table with information that's coming in asynchronously, possibly, on the sales order header. And that required us to do the same type of thing, where we want to first identify the current version of the sales order header, and we want to interjoin that to all of our unprocessed records, so that when we do that load, we're only loading the current version of all of our sales order headers. Quickly take a look at that. So fact current sales order header. This could be, or should be, very similar to what we just looked at. Okay, you can see that we have a maximum value here on modified date grouping by sales order ID. Great. Now we know we can identify the current version of all sales order header or sales order ID records. Then we have a fact aggregate sales order header. We should be doing the same thing we just saw a moment ago. That's what we're doing. We're interjoining on our fact current, and we're doing that on this JOE current header. I can get a quick look at that definition by selecting the join. This is going to be my on clause here. It's going to be modified date and sales order IDs are the same. So exactly the same thing as we just saw a moment ago. Notice that I'm not worried too much at this point at which fields I'm outputting. This is a view only. We might come back in and clean this up a little bit after we get done creating our facts and dimensions. Okay, that concludes the transform component course. We'll see you in the next course.